I mean, like, this was someone who was one of the most successful in her business, sort of a math nerd, kind of a quiet kid from Canada. All of a sudden, not only was she fired summarily without any benefits and without any severance, lost all the benefits that she'd been accruing. She couldn't get a job anywhere else in the industry because her name is now radioactive because of these media lies that have been told about her. I mean, I think it was CBS even ran with a story saying she had been convicted at one point. And it was like, the case ended up being, she was not only, was it all dismissed, it was dismissed with prejudice, with no deal, no diversion, no nothing. This was an acknowledgement by the city of New York that it was a complete mistake what the allegations were against her.
You know, you mentioned related to defunding the police and how in Kenosha that we've seen this in so many of these cities that they're just, the law enforcement is not doing what it's supposed to do. As you know, I'm still here in crazy LA. We've got a DA, this guy George Gascon, Bernie-backed DA, middle-aged white guy who got rid of our first female black DA. Not that I care about that, but I thought, you know, the identity politics people do. In any event, he is doing exactly what he did in San Francisco before, which is exactly what Chesa Boudin is doing in San Francisco now, where they are just choosing not to prosecute certain crimes. Now, I'm not a legal expert, but this is, at this point, this is seeming criminal to me. Like, when they swear themselves, or when they get sworn in, it's to defend the laws, and they're just picking which laws they're not defending. Do they need to be sued? I mean, there's recalls in place, but is this not just like the most obvious dereliction of duty?
I think there should be more legal remedies. Our current courts make it almost impossible to ever sue prosecutors, but it's like the Texas sheriff suing Biden over refusal to enforce immigration laws. The same thing, because what they're really doing is they're weaponizing a criminal class. It's kind of like early 1920s Russia, that the initial stage of the Soviet Revolution, they often weaponized the criminal class to side with them in the ongoing civil war that took place post 1917. That's what they're kind of doing here. It's kind of what they did with the Black Panthers in the late 60s, early 70s. People don't know how much they were embedded with drug dealers and criminal operations. The thought process was, this can be our own political street army, allowing them to sort of extend their political power. Like, it's like Escape from LA might soon be a documentary rather than just a film. But that's the
it's the name of my documentary.
And deservedly so. I mean, because this is insane what's taking place. I mean, when people can't even go into a why would you even buy anything anymore under $1,000? You're walking in, you see somebody walk in, steal a bunch of stuff, and walk right out. This is just insanity. But what does it promote? It promotes disrespect for the law. What that produces is 1970s level crime problems. And now politically, that almost always leads to a backlash. But in the interim, a lot of working class people are the primary people to suffer. It's not the West Side Beverly Hills crowd that's going to suffer. It's the South Central and East LA folks who are going to suffer.
Right. So to be clear, right now in New York City, because of their ridiculous DA, you are allowed to jump the turnstile. So if you are paying to get on the subway, you're basically a sucker. We're saying, hey, why are you paying? Just get on your good high tops and jump that thing. And then here in LA or San Francisco, you are now allowed to trespass. I think it's $800 that you're allowed to steal from a store. So I always tell people you can get a PlayStation 5 with 4 games. You can't get 5 games. Then you're over the threshold. Then you could be in trouble. But it's like you're encouraging people to break the law, basically.
And I would have more respect for them if they said, we'll prosecute anybody who steals less than 2,000, but let anybody off who steals more than 10,000. Because then they would be down on Rodeo Drive. But instead, they're basically asking, like, I have a client that's a Mexican-American shop owner that owns little grocery stores throughout East LA. They're the number ones who are people victimized by this. This doesn't help working class people. This hurts working class, honest people and rewards the criminal class for the benefit of a political class. And that's why it's very dangerous, but its politics is not even what they pretend it to be.
So what about when we see Democrats? I mean, I think Kamala Harris actually, as a candidate, it was before the election had taken place, she was actually helping fund some of these Antifa people get out of jail in Minneapolis and some other places. They are breaking the laws, but for some reason, Antifa's still on Twitter and everywhere else. You know, Trump's gone, but they're everywhere. And that we actually have politicians that are raising money to help criminals that burn down stores and, you know, attack cars on the street to get out of jail.
Yeah, I mean, it's extraordinary. The last time we had anything like this was late 1960s, when you had people in bed with the Black Panthers, in bed with actually, Weather Underground, in bed with a wide range of, there was like a different revolutionary name every other week. People forget the Crips, actually like the Committee for Revolution or whatever. I mean, it was smart. Your local gang, and you're like, oh, we just rebrand. We rebrand as political, and now we can steal stuff and kill people, and everything's okay. It's kosher. But that's the same. We brought back that mindset. It was a disaster last time. I don't know why anybody believes it's going to be anything other than a disaster this time.
What kind of backlash do you think we're going to see on this stuff?
Well, if the 1970s are any preview, you're going to see Dirty Harry style backlash. You're going to see, I mean, like J.D. Vance's grandmother, her hero was Dirty Harry because of growing up in that political area. That's why she had that 44 next door, even when she couldn't physically lift it, later on in life. So I think that's the kind of mindset you're going to see. You're going to see more and more people, and I hope they don't go too far. I hope people were met. Civil rights are important. Those are sometimes violated by police actors. And sometimes in the 70s, people were so mad at the lawlessness that they greenlit some abusive behaviors. I think we need to find the right balance in countering what's taking place by the left currently.
Do you think it's possible that the cities just aren't going to work anymore? Like New York City, for example, where I lived for most of my adult life, 20 years. I loved New York City. If you can make it there, you can make it anywhere. Like, I think everyone, until these last couple of years, I would say that everyone in America should live there for a little while just to get a taste of that thing. But the idea of being there now, where at any given moment, they can attack you on the street if you're sitting at a restaurant, or they can break into the store, or hop the subway thing, or the litany of other things going on, like that, maybe city life in a political environment like this just doesn't work.
Well, just look at my client, Amy Cooper, because the background you're describing is the context they failed to include in the media coverage. She's just out to help her dog run, and they'd shut down the dog runs in the name of COVID somehow. So the only place she could help get her dog run to even get outside during this lockdown era last summer was in the park. And so she's by herself early in the morning in the park, and then suddenly somebody jumps her, says that they got some, little treats for her dog, which would scare anybody, particularly a young single woman in a city, particularly in the environment of what was happening in New York at the time, where crime was skyrocketing and everything else. And she reacts by just wanting to call police. And then she's blamed. She's demonized. She loses her job. She has to leave the country. She's blacklisted from employment. And originally she was criminally prosecuted until I got the prosecutor to dismiss all charges. That's reality of life in New York City. What went from being a dream went for someone like her, a quiet, kid on the spectrum, to being an utter nightmare.
Right. So that case, which we also covered that one. I mean, there's video basically where she's telling the guy to get away from her. But of course, the media framed it, surprise, surprise, as if she's a white supremacist and this nice black man just approached her to play with the dog and everything else. Now, obviously, some of that stuff will work out. But when someone like her gets fired from their job from something like that, what is the legal recourse that they have? Because it had nothing to do with anything she did, obviously, at the office.
And completely demonized. I mean, like, this was someone who was one of the most successful in her business, sort of a math nerd, kind of a quiet kid from Canada. All of a sudden, not only was she fired summarily without any benefits and without any severance, lost all the benefits that she'd been accruing, she couldn't get a job anywhere else in the industry because her name is now radioactive because of these media lies that have been told about her. I mean, I think it was CBS even ran with a story saying she had been convicted at one point. It was like, the case ended up being, she was not only, was it all dismissed, it was dismissed with prejudice, with no deal, no diversion, no nothing. This was an acknowledgement by the city of New York that it was a complete mistake what the allegations were against her. Because the truth came out, she had talked to the cops at the scene. She had clarified everything without any question or controversy. What they didn't know is that first time when she's on the phone, they couldn't hear her. The phone is breaking up, which if you understand that, that's why she's panicking. She's like, there's nobody coming to rescue me. And as to your point as to that guy, a week before when he did the same thing to an African-American man, that man almost beat him up. That was that response. But, but it gives you a sense when you live in that kind of environment where overnight you can feel like you're in Kafka's The Trial, then in the world enripped by crime and lockdowns, New York City looks like Escape from New York, John Carpenter, instead of New York of dreams, New York, the Big Apple, New York, Sleepless in Seattle kind of New York.
Right. Well, that's also the thing. It's like people were so hyper racialized right now to think about race all the time, to realize that everyone's got a camera, to think that someone's coming to get you because, crime is jumping, that everyone is a little bit jumpy. But for the average person that sees that, I think what they think is, oh, I'm never going to speak up about anything because I don't want to lose my job. What advice would you give to people relative to keeping their jobs but still being able to speak up? Because that's probably like the number one question I get at this point. I don't want to lose my job.
Yeah, what's interesting is, Michael Malice has a version of curse them with your yes sirs. Like figure out whatever their conspiracy theories are about you and play into them.
Right.
And then they'll be even more terrified and whatnot. So there's a lot and it's the old Ralph Ellison phrase, curse them with your yes sirs from Invisible Man. So I think I think for each person, I don't impose on anybody an obligation to be a hero. You don't have to go out and make a noble stand. If you feel like you're in a position where you can, then I encourage people to do so. And lawyers like me will help bring suits for them. We're challenging mask mandates. We're challenging vaccine mandates. We're challenging these unconstitutional firings, brought defamation claims from everybody from the Covington kids to anybody that's been politically targeted for the wrong purposes. Currently suing Don Lemon over some of his behavior. So not afraid. There's lawyers out there that will be willing to represent you and justify your cause. But that doesn't mean you have to be a hero. Do what makes the most sense for you and figure out the best way you can both assert your independence, care about what you care about, and still protect what matters most to you. And sometimes that means protect your job.
If you're looking for more honest and thoughtful conversation about law instead of the nonstop yelling you get everywhere else, check out our law playlist. And if you want to watch full interviews on a variety of topics, check out our full episode playlist. They're both right over here. And to get notified of all future videos, be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell.